right, we're back in public session after executive. The next item on the agenda, item 6, is committee reports and action items. The first one is the committee I chair, Board Governance and Personnel. We had a meeting on July 18th. It was very short, 9:30 to about 9:48. Everybody was in attendance at that time. The bit of business was the SERS fiduciary review and board self-assessment, final report, and implementation of recommendations. So we had the final report finally from the Funston information. The board consultant evaluation procedures. After the May 5th, 2022 board meeting, the Board Governance and Personnel Committee referred the consultant evaluation procedures to the Audit Committee and the Finance and Member Committee and the Investment Committee for review and comment. June 3rd, 2022, the committee meetings, each respective committee, the three above, reviewed and discussed the implementation of the board consultant evaluation procedures. At the June 10, 2022 board meeting, each committee reported to the board that they had completed their review of the consultant evaluation procedures and confirmed their intent to begin consultant evaluations as set forth in the board consultant evaluations procedures. So, staff recommended during the July 18th, 2022 meeting, Board Governance and Personnel Committee, that the committee recommend to the board that adopt the board consultant evaluation procedures. Each standing committee shall establish evaluation procedures to include expectations and criteria consistent with the procedures outlined in SERS consultant evaluation procedures located in board docs at 4A prior to the 2022, with the implementation of the evaluation procedures to begin in January of 2023. There was a vote amongst the board, the members of the committee. It was unanimous. So with that, I move that the board approve the Board Governance and Personnel Committee recommendation to approve the State Employees Retirement Board consultant evaluation procedures as set forth in the attachments. Properly moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker.
Aye.
Mr. Erdman for Senator DeSanto.
Aye.
Chair Philman.
Aye.
Representative Frankel.
Aye.
Treasurer Garrity or designee.
Aye.
Senator Hughes or designee.
Aye.
Mr. Jordan.
Aye.
Representative Schemmel.
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg.
Aye.
Secretary Thal.
Aye.
Secretary Vague. Secretary Vague or designee.
If needed, this is Alan Flanagan. Aye.
Thank you. Unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we went to, continuing with the committee report, we went to an executive session to discuss the executive director's mid-year report. So that ends the report of the Board Governance Committee. Our next report is investment. Chairman Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The July 18 meeting of the Investment Committee was called to order at 10:02. We approved the minutes of the July 3 Investment Committee meeting. Joe Marcucci provided notification of Jeff McCormick's new position as a portfolio manager with the Investment Office. Jeff was formerly Deputy Chief Counsel as well as Counsel to the Investment Committee. Jared Snyder then introduced 3 new members of the Investment Office team. They are all investment analysts: Steve Shank, Matt Seacrest, and Jenny Kine. Jim Nolan then provided the committee with a summary of the transactions that were made to rebalance the portfolio to the approved asset allocation target, which were approved at the May 5 meeting. We entered executive session to discuss the CIO performance review, as well as an update on our stock distribution policies. We returned to public session and our meeting was adjourned at 10:32. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now go into old business, the private equity opportunity. Is there something, Jim, you need to discuss on this, or? We'll just go right into the motion. Okay? Okay, well, with that, a motion is in order to accept the recommendation of the investment committee to, one, commit up to $100 million to Sentinel Capital Partners 7 LP, and two, commit up to $25 million to Sentinel Junior Capital 2 LP, plus investment expenses and pro rata share of partnership operating expenses consistent with executed partnership documents as investments within the private equity asset class, subject to successful completion of contract negotiations and execution and delivery of closing documents by all parties, including required Commonwealth legal approvals within 12 months. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I hear a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker,
Aye.
Mr. Erdman for Senator DeSanto,
Aye.
Chairman Philman,
Aye.
Representative Frankel.
Aye.
I see the treasurer's with us, Treasurer Garrity,
Aye.
Ms. Marchowski for Senator Hughes,
Aye.
Mr. Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Schemmel,
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg,
Aye.
Secretary Thal,
Aye.
Secretary Vague or designee.
Aye.
Thank you. Unanimous vote.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. With that, the motion passes. Under new business, we have none. We do have a special presentation, which is an education session, Introduction to Risk Controls and Enterprise Risk Management. Who's taking this? Okay.
Karen Lynn.
Hi there. I
Thank you.
am checking to see if our presenters are with us yet. If they are, can they speak up?
No.
I think they're a little delayed. I can reach out, but can we move on the agenda until we might want to switch it up?
No. What'd she say?
I'm gonna have to reach out. I thought our presenters are not with us yet. I will be, I need to reach out. I apologize. I thought they were gonna be
Can you
with
do
us by now.
Okay, then let us do this. We'll move the. We'll move the reports of executive director and senior staff up till we get our presentation together. So I'll turn it over to Joe Torta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few things. First of all, my administrative update is tab 10A, small letter I in board docs. Several items, legislative hearing. You'll notice that we were asked to testify before the Senate State Government Committee and to talk about Russian and Belarusian holdings. I read prepared remarks, as did the representatives from the public school system as well as the municipal retirement system. We did that at the request of the committee, and we're very pleased to do so. In the spirit of engagement and building relationships, I have since traveled to multiple regional field offices, engaging staff, doing the same here in central office. It was a major objective of mine when I became executive director. If it's a drum that it sounds like I'm beating, that's because I'm just continuing to beat the drum. It's very important to me, and I think that is going very well. It's been very well received by staff, both internally here in Harrisburg as well as across the regions. I'll be traveling to the Bensalem office in the very near future, as well as Seneca and again in State College to look over some renovations that were done in those offices. We're improving security in those offices. Just some long needed renovations. I'm very pleased to be able to do that for staff and for our members. It's going to make it a much more enjoyable and secure experience for everybody involved. As you know, we see a lot of people in our regional offices. We meet with our members one-on-one, and it's important that we do so in the most secure and pleasant venue possible. So I'm pleased that we've been able to do that. From the standpoint of personnel, I'm usually the bearer of bad news. I'm very pleased to say that we're doing well. Last week, when I got the vacancy report, it's the first time since I became executive director that we had less than 50 vacancies. That might sound like a lot, but it's a very good number. We were close to 60 vacancies. That's a pendulum that continues to swing. The Human Resources Office, our Human Resources Director, Katie Matthews, and her staff work very hard to try and make sure that the processes keep moving. It's a very drawn-out matter to recruit and interview and select and then secure talent. Everybody's struggling right now, but we've been able to fill a number of critical positions on that front. I want to take the opportunity while I'm talking about personnel to introduce to the full board the new Deputy Executive Director for the Office of Member and Participant Services. I hope you recall that's my previous position. I'm very pleased to introduce to you Brenda Cunard. I have mentioned her at previous board meetings. Once her selection was made, she's now on staff and she's learning the ropes. We're bringing her up to speed, and she has asked just to make a brief statement to the full board. So, Brenda.
Good morning, everyone. As Joe said, my name is Brenda Kennard. I was most recently with the Public School Employees Retirement System in the Bureau of Communications and Counseling. I worked with our regional office managers and our staff who were responsible for doing member education and counseling. Previously, I did work for the State Employees Retirement System as a counselor in the Pittsburgh field office. So I am very happy to be back at SERS, happy to be working with our members and staff and to serve all of you as board members. After this meeting, I am going to send all of my contact information to all of you. So if you have any questions, run into issues, have any concerns, as I said, or have coworkers or neighbors or friends who reach out to you, please reach out to me directly. I'll be happy to help and work with you. So thank you for giving me a minute to talk.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you, Brenda, very much, and welcome to SERS on behalf of the board and the entire agency. As you know, as many board members know, designees, we're here to serve the members. If you have anybody that you know, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, your constituents, anybody needs assistance, we're available. You know, in charge of customer service. I'm very pleased to make that selection, and her dedication to customer service is the reason why she's here today. And if Brenda's ever not available, I am always available. And many of you know that as you reach out to me, nothing is more important to me, nothing, than serving the members of our system and the participants of our system. So along those lines, I'm very pleased that we've been able to continue that, and that is very important to me, very important to Brenda as well. So I thank you for your consideration in that regard. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is the strategic plan. It's rearing its ugly head again, because at the end of this fiscal year, the current strategic plan will close down and the new strategic plan will start. I just want to put that on everybody's radar screen. We encourage board participation going forward with the development of the new strategic plan, and the planning for that is commencing almost immediately. It starts almost a year in advance. So we're going to be initiating those discussions, and just be aware that we will be drawing the board in at your discretion in the near future once we reach the point where we want to move forward with the new plan. It commences 7/1/23, so there's still plenty of time, but the preparation for the new strategic plan will be commencing in the very near future, within the next several weeks. Second item on my agenda is the legislative update. That's tab 10A, small letter II. Got to do something about how we label these. But legislatively, there were a lot of things bouncing around. You know, SERS was contacted on a number of independent pieces of legislation. I know the legal staff, the communications staff, the actuaries did a lot of work on behalf of SERS for the members of the General Assembly. As it turned out, you know, when at the date that this document was prepared, I don't believe the budget was signed yet. The budget was signed. The only piece of legislation that SERS worked on extensively that actually went into that the governor took action on was our appropriations. I know I was away on vacation and I saw that there were over 30 pieces of legislation that the governor signed. I assumed I would have been made aware if one of them had been related to SERS other than the appropriation, but I scanned them very closely and was very interested to see that that the General Assembly and the governor chose not to take action on many of the initiatives that we had provided information on. But I really want to thank staff as well as the members of the General Assembly and their staffs, legal and otherwise, because a lot of work went into considering different aspects of things that would impact the retirement system. And while nothing took place, that's not a reflection of the effort that staff, put forth and the levels of engagement that we have with individual members of the General Assembly. The third item is the board order, tab 10A III in your board docs. There's one administrative hearing dismissal order to report, and the account of Daniel R.L. McGuire, it's docket number 2020-02. The claim of Daniel R.L. McGuire. Mr. McGuire applied for a disability annuity. His disability benefit request was denied on medical merits. Mr. McGuire appealed and requested a hearing. During the hearing process, Mr. McGuire withdrew his request for a disability annuity. The chairman, under his delegated authority on behalf of the board, dismissed Mr. McGuire's appeal with prejudice, and I'm required to report that to you, and I have now done so. That concludes my report. I welcome any questions from the board, from any of the designees. If anyone has anything of me, I am available to answer. Mr. Jordan.
Thanks, Joe. I was just wondering, some time ago, we authorized the creation of a bunch of positions in the IT department to sort of manage and maintain the new computer system. I was just wondering how that's going.
Well, we filled the majority of those positions. Okay, and what they're doing is they're absorbing the work that the contractor Infomatrix had been doing. There's a transition taking place, so we're metering down our reliance on the contractors and centralizing the job knowledge and the functions to our internal IT staff, which we think will be much more effective going forward. It's a long process. The 2.0 project I put on hold. I wanted to assess the business needs to make sure that they were being met, and I meet weekly with the IT director to review those goals. We have a strategic team that meets, on a biweekly basis to review where we are. Steering committee. I slimmed that down a little bit to focus on the business partners that would actually utilize the system. So a long answer to your short question is those positions, the majority of which have been filled, they are all under active recruitment, the ones that haven't been filled. And it's early in the game as far as the final transition goes, but we're pleased. I'm hoping that this fall I'm able to report to the board the final direction that we're able to take. We're just not there yet from the standpoint of a timetable as to when we go live. My hope is that it'll be sometime next year, but I'm going to rely on the development of the system and its ability to meet our business needs and engage the business users much more directly. Since I took over as executive director, I thought that was the most effective approach going forward, and I'd be happy to talk to you anytime you want about that as the situation develops. Sure. Thanks, Greg. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my report.
Okay, do we have the presenters? Okay. So
Ready?
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Our next two speakers are from the Commonwealth's Bureau of Audits. Amanda Williams is an audit manager with 20+ years of government experience with over half in auditing. Amanda serves as the manager for the risk assessment team responsible for creating and implementing the risk assessment approach utilized by each Commonwealth agency. Amanda holds an accounting degree from Elizabethtown College and serves on the board of several local not-for-profits. John Gaspich is the Audit Division Chief in the Bureau of Audits and oversees the Risk Assessment Division, which is a major driver in the Commonwealth's Enterprise Risk Management Initiative. John is a certified public accountant, a certified fraud examiner, a certified government financial manager, and holds several other designations. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a Master of Law and a Master of Public Administration. He also holds a degree in accounting from Penn State. John has over 30 years experience in numerous industries as well as international public accounting firms. John has been an instructor and a frequent lecturer in law and compliance at Penn Law School and is a training facilitator for the Institute of Internal Auditors. I've only given a fraction of John's and Amanda's very impressive credentials and accomplishments. Their bios can be found on board docs. Welcome, Amanda and John. You have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Good morning.
I'm going to turn my camera off just to ensure we have the proper bandwidth and everything to get through this presentation. Thank you for having us, and hopefully you find this useful. Okay, today we're going to cover risk management and enterprise risk management. Enterprise risk management right now is a hot button issue and everyone seems to be discussing it. However, we want to ensure that there's a full understanding of what risk management in general is and provide a key foundation of what the terms and descriptions of those type activities are. Go ahead. Am I switching these or are you?
My understanding is out there. Thank you.
So today's objectives will be understanding the fundamentals of risk management, understanding what the risk assessment process is, and understanding the value of enterprise risk management. Next. Next, let's define what risk is. So risk is any internal or external event that could affect an entity's ability to achieve its business objectives, vision, or mission. The mission is the core purpose your agency has and the reason for its existence, and the vision being the ideal state that your agency wishes to achieve as you move forward and look ahead. Risks are multifaceted and include compliance with the plethora of laws, regulations, policies, procedures, and everything else that governs the operations that we have. Next. When assessing risk, it's important to understand that there are various types of risk. We have control risk, inherent risk, and residual risk. Inherent risk is the risk facing your agency, both internal and external, but that's before any controls or policies or procedures or any risk mitigation strategies that are established may play in reducing that risk. Residual risk is the risk that remains after you basically take all the inherent risks and apply those policies and procedures. And then the residual risk is the outcome of all of those components. Next, please. So inherent risk is the risk an entity faces in the absence of any actions, policies, procedures, or the like. So inherent risk, when you think about the way your business operates, you have significant inherent risks. The complexity of the transactions that you undertake, the liquidity and valuation of assets, derivatives, non-standard financial instruments, real estate investments, and the like, the way those are valued and the risks associated with those. Data loss, mishandling of data, access to data, any protected information. Third-party vendors present significant exterior or external risk because not only are you worried about your internal controls and the system, the integrity of those controls, you're now placing reliance on third-party vendors and their controls. The susceptibility, misappropriation of assets, related party transactions are always a high concern. The effectiveness of management, the integrity that they bring to the table, and the tone at the top. So governance structures itself present an inherent risk from the perspective of if the message is not sent properly from the top, from the board, to management and its employees, that in itself could be a negative inherent risk. And then sentinel events, those that are unexpected, a pandemic where the country basically has to transition to a work from home environment, supply chain issues, those types of things. Those are sentinel events that nobody really plans for, but it's important that we have controls, policies and procedures, plans in place to deal with those types of unknowns. Next. We can define internal controls as a process affected by an agency's personnel that provides reasonable assurance that the objectives of the entity are being achieved. Simply stated, controls are any policies, procedures, or mechanisms established to help reduce risk. These are the essential elements in risk management to address the internal risks or inherent risks that we just went over. So policies, procedures, segregations of duties. We don't want one person handling all the facets of a particular transaction. We want to ensure that management reviews and approves transactions, especially those that are unusual, highly susceptible to risk, fraud, and misvaluation and the like. The qualifications and experience of personnel in key positions, the training of personnel to make sure that they not only know how to do their job, but they understand the policies and procedures that they're supposed to follow when approving transactions. The documentation of transactions, the quality of the documentation, the significance, the substantiation of the transaction that's occurring, the retention of those records, and ensuring that there's an audit trail for people like us to come in afterwards and ensure that the transactions were processed appropriately. Internal and external audits are controls. Your internal audit department is key in that, but the external audit also adds another layer of assurance that things are operating properly. One key is in your financial statement opinion, it always says that they're materially correct, not 100% accurate. So that's why it's incumbent upon management who owns the control environment to ensure that things are handled properly or presented properly or reported properly. And again, the governance oversight, again, is one of the key internal controls, being active at the board level, having an actively engaged executive management team that basically creates a culture where the management team and all the employees are moving in the same direction, understand the strategic mission and objective of the entity, and are committed to moving in the right direction. Next. So the control risk is present that a material misstatement or event could not be prevented, detected, or corrected by the established internal control structure. So basically, the control risk is a transaction or activity actually gets processed through the system and was not picked up. There are two types of controls that are key, one being preventative controls. So those are the policies and procedures, the supervisory reviews, the system edit checks, the electronic monitoring of transactions to identify unusual transactions, transactions that require an additional level of management review and the like. From the control perspective, preventative controls are key. So It's much better to prevent something from happening than it occurring and then hoping that the audit detects it later. Preventative controls also help protect the reputation and public image of your entity, because you don't want anything to happen that could negatively impact that. The detective controls, on the other hand, are those that happen afterwards or detect that something unusual is or has occurred. Those being audit, so the post audits, the data analytics. So if you have analytics in place, those could pick up unusual transactions before they get processed. Again, kind of overlying with the preventative controls, but also detecting that something inappropriate may happen. And then the reconciliation processes that happen after transactions are processed. Reconciliations a lot of times, identify things that don't really meet the parameters of the policies and procedures, or what was expected and what should have occurred. Next. So residual risk, again, is what's left after you take the inherent risks, apply the control procedures, the internal control procedures, and the residual risk is what's left. So that's the threat, vulnerability, remaining risk that remains after all the risk treatments and efforts have been implemented. So as far as residual risk goes, there's really 4 ways to address it. Some of these just aren't acceptable in the real world. One is risk avoidance. So basically not undertaking any activity that's risky. That in the normal business sense is probably not a strong, valid position to take. I'd use a healthcare situation as a prime example just to convey what that means. So patients are going to die in a hospital. So risk avoidance for a hospital would be not to take patients that are in serious health condition, or trauma patients. Well, that's the core mission of the entity. So risk avoidance in that position wouldn't really apply. Risk reduction, those are, again, the policies, procedures, the training, stop loss insurance, making sure that we have, business oversight, board oversight, all the things that contribute to reducing the risks that we have, to ensure that management is properly executing in accordance with the plans of the board, the strategic plan, and the like, and isn't straying, going into areas that are more risky than that acceptable by the board. So a risk tolerance from the board perspective is important to be conveyed to the management team, so that they can make sure that risks that you don't really want them to go into are avoided. Risk transfer, again, is a stop loss insurance coverage, transferring the risk to another agency if it's more appropriately placed there, and the like. And the final piece of dealing with this is risk acceptance. So things are going to happen. Investment portfolios are going to lose money at times. That's just part of the nature of the business practice. And back to my healthcare example, patients will die. That is going to happen, but you have to ensure that they were given the proper care, proper protocol was followed, and the like. So risk will happen. Again, it has to be within the tolerable error, tolerable levels that the board is willing to accept, and making sure that everything is done in its place to ensure that that level of risk is acceptable to everyone. Next, please. So a risk assessment is a periodic process to identify, analyze, and document responses to risk, while risk management is the ongoing process that we've been talking about. A risk assessment is a point-in-time activity. It can be done any point in time at the request of management, at the request of the board. Can be done on a recurring schedule, example, annually, to get a sense of progress and risks that have previously been identified, or it can be conducted when a major event triggers management's interest or the board's interest. Often before a major decision or the initiation of a new project is undertaken, a risk assessment can be done at that point to ensure that everything has been identified, proper resources are in place, financial resources and the like. Management's prepared to undertake the project and the like. A risk assessment is a valuable tool that helps you identify and prepare for any difficulties that may present in the future. It's actually a great exercise to create a business continuity plan, a disaster recovery plan, to address those risks that could happen, and just to make sure that management has plans in place to mitigate, eliminate, or address the issue. So again, in the process, it's the identification of those risks, analyzing them, documenting those risks, and then having a game book, a playbook of how we're going to respond. And basically, in a disaster recovery mode, it's better to know that we've got the policies and procedures and everyone knows how we're going to execute, versus being in the middle of the event and everybody looking at each other, not really knowing what the game plan is. Next, please. So risk management, again, is the ongoing process of identifying and analyzing your risks, developing responses to those risks, and improving the deployment of assets. Again, some of those reallocation of resources can be through personnel, budgetary movements, reallocation of resources, bringing in external resources and consultants and experts, the policies and procedures that we put in place, and basically having an open and honest communication and dialogue on what is an acceptable level of risk and what strategies do we want to put in place to avoid risk, address risk, and plan for those unusual events. Next, please. So this basically sums up the entire strategy that we use. So in the top left box is an objective. So those are our objectives. Now today we're going to use an example of whether we should purchase or renovate a home within our budget. So the objective is to provide a safe living environment and ensure that it's a solid house and it's going to last a long time. In box number 2, we identify the inherent risks and assign a score. L is the likelihood, I is the impact, and S is the score, which is obviously L times I. So the first inherent risk that we've identified is unaffordable mortgage. Next is unforeseen renovation costs, a house fire, home break-in, lead paint, and squeaky floors. So box 3, we then determine the risk response. So what do we want to do for each one of these identified risks? So for the first 4, unaffordable mortgage, the renovation cost, house fire, home break-in, we want to reduce those risks, but because we really do want the house. So we're going to do everything we can to reduce the risk because we want to basically acquire the properties or renovate them to our plan. The last two, lead paint and squeaky floors, while we want to avoid those types of issues, but they may not be a total game changer. Box 4 is to identify the controls that we could put in place to help identify or help address those risks and assess them. So as far as the affordability of the mortgage, we could get a financial advisor. We could get a home inspection for the renovation costs, so we know what we're getting into. We want to make sure we have smoke detectors, a security system to deal with fire break-in. And then as far as the lead paint and squeaky floors, there's nothing we can really do as far as controls except test for those and see if they exist. So then we go to the scoring of the residual risk in box 5. So as far as the unaffordable mortgage, the likelihood of that, after consultation with the financial advisors, we now assume that the likelihood of that is low because the advisor provided information, although the impact would still be 5, which would be high. Unforeseen renovation costs, we've hired an inspector. The likelihood that we're going to run into problems is a 3 with a impact of 5. The house fire, we've got the smoke detectors, but they can't really prevent a fire. So we're saying that would be a 3, and the impact would be a 3. Now, again, the scaling of these items is all subjective. I mean, there are definitely criteria on what a 5 is versus a 1. But when it does come down to it, you look at the total picture and assign it based on the information that we have. So we then do the same for the others. So what the key takeaway here is that our mitigation strategies have basically addressed the biggest issues that we identified in box 2, and those that basically, kept us up at night, caused concern, and, raised the issues. So at the end of the day, our mitigation strategies basically come down to the home inspection with the renovation costs. So we've established a contingency fund. So we know what our budget is, but we still have extra money just in case we run into those unforeseen items. So if you look at box 5, the renovation cost is a 15. So what we've done is our highest score, we've created a pot of money on the side so that if something in there does occur, we've still got our safety net fund to help us address that and get through it. And then the next highest risk was the house fire. So we just want to make sure that we have fire extinguishers and the like. But it's not as significant of a risk at that point. So as you can see, because of the assessments that we've done, the controls we put in place, we basically took the key issues that we initially identified, and through all of those efforts, we've either eliminated or mitigated their impact. So I know I kind of flew through this material, but hopefully you understand how we address the various types of risk within organizations and how we get to our ultimate risk management approach. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, and she's going to now move into how the Commonwealth as a whole is taking all this risk management information and addressing it on enterprise-wide levels to ensure the Commonwealth as a whole is addressing these types of issues to achieve its strategic goals. So are there any particular questions in what I covered before I turn it over to Amanda?
Any questions? Seeing none, keep going.
Go ahead, Amanda.
All right, thanks, John. Now that we have the
now that we understand the fundamentals of risk management and the risk assessment process, we're going to look at the value of enterprise risk management. What is the difference between risk management and enterprise risk management? Enterprise risk management is taking risk management and applying it in an organized and consistent way across an agency. Our definition of enterprise risk management is the coordinated application of risk management and internal control activities within the Commonwealth. The goal is to ensure agencies have a consistent method to identify, analyze, and respond to risks through the application of effective internal controls. The two key points on this slide to focus on is consistent and coordinated. Next slide, please. Enterprise risk management aligns with the Commonwealth's Healthy Government Framework, often referred to as LEAN. As seen here, the Healthy Government Framework covers four major components: purpose, process, management systems, and capability. At the center is the key, a human-centered mindset and culture. Next slide, please. Enterprise risk management plays an important role in each of these components. So for purpose, when setting strategy and goals, a healthy government acknowledges the risks to those goals and develops plans to address them. Process. Healthy government puts in place a process to identify, analyze, and respond to risks. Management system. Management encourages discussions about risk at all levels of the organization. Capability. Healthy government ensures employees understand the basic concepts of enterprise risk management and are provided guidance on how to apply them. Now, most importantly, healthy government has a culture that empowers employees to report risks they see without fear of retribution. So as you can see, ERM supports a healthy government framework. The statements here are meant to reflect the ideal state of ERM implementation. ERM and healthy government rely on a culture of open communication where employees feel comfortable raising concerns and ideas for improvement. Next slide, please. So the value of ERM and where it's kind of evolved from. So we recognize that agencies and units within those agencies across the Commonwealth will be at various levels of maturity in their enterprise risk management journey. Our goal is to incrementally move up the ladder of the ERM evolution. So traditionally, risk management was equated with the purchase of insurance, here seen as the transactional stage of ERM's evolution. The next stage of ERM, defensive, risk management is a separate task to be completed. The goal is to move towards the highest level of ERM evolution where risk management is strategic and built into operational processes across the organization. Next slide, please. So Management Directive 325.12 has evolved over the years. The update to the Management Directive for this coming period ending June 30th looks much different than in the prior years. ERM provides value through a comprehensive view and consistent analysis of risks and opportunities, which in turn can better drive management decisions. The new approach is meant to align with existing management processes such as strategic planning and budgeting. You see some of these links here. The first link is the link to the updated management directive. Due date is September 30th for period ending June 30, 2022. And additional guidance can be found on the SharePoint sites for Office of the Budget, as well as the Green Book. But in later slides, we'll also have some contact information if there's any additional questions on that. Next slide, please. So the most important question is, what can employees do? So what can you do as a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania employee? If you notice a risk in your area, most specifically an unmitigated risk, please speak with your supervisor. Famous Pennsylvanian Mr. Rogers once said that when feelings become mentionable, they become manageable. It is very similar with risk. When we are able to identify and talk about risks in the workplace, those risks then become manageable. You may seek out additional resources on the Office of Performance Through Excellence ERM website, as well as the Controller Operations team maintains a resource account that you can send us questions on how to address risks and request further consultation. Next slide, please. That brings us to the end of our presentation. As John said earlier, it's a lot of information crammed into a short presentation. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Nothing.
Chairman, I'd just like to mention something briefly.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to give kudos to the whole team of controller operations. They've really taken a hard stab and a big lead in to implementing this Commonwealth lot wide, and their efforts here have not been gone unnoticed, and they should be applauded for their efforts. So thank you guys, and keep up the good work.
Agreed, Mr. Secretary. A good presentation, giving us some enlightenment into the risk areas. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. We learned a lot today. Thank you. Okay, we'll go back on the agenda. We are now scheduled for an executive session. So, Joe, you want to tee that one up?
The Sunshine Act allows an executive session to discuss pending or threatened litigation, and also to have privileged attorney-client communication on non-litigation matters. All of the subjects scheduled for the executive session are one of those two types of items, and therefore the executive session is appropriate.
Okay, Don?
Before we enter executive session, please give us a minute to make a few technical changes. As a reminder to the public, this live meeting will resume on the live stream connection when the executive session is complete. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. Thank you.
Okay, we are back in public session. The last piece of the agenda is board comments, announcements, dates to remember. I have nothing further to add other than our next committee meetings are September 22nd, and the general board meeting is September 29th of 2022. With that, a motion for adjourn is appropriate. I hear a motion. Do I hear a second? I hear a second. Anyone a question? Hearing none, all in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Aye. Motion carried. Thank you.